Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little raw, a little cold, and a lot uncomfortable. You're standing at the edge of a medieval village, the kind with no cobblestone, just a smattering of mud-hardened footpaths and crooked cottages clinging to each other like frightened kittens. It's midwinter. Not the cute, holiday card kind with cozy sweaters and jingling bells, but the real, bone-deep freeze-your-face-off kind. You can't feel your fingers. You can't feel your toes. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. But let's try anyway. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're trudging across the frost-bitten fields just beyond the manor. The fields are sleeping now, blanketed in a crusty snow that crackles under your feet. Your breath fogs the air, and even your shadow looks like it's trying to stay warm. Around you, not a bird sings. Not a cow moos. The animals have more sense than to move much this time of year. Approaching the village, you notice the outlines of low, thatched roof houses huddled together like gossiping old ladies. Smoke snakes from the holes in the rooftops. Chimneys are still a luxury for your class, and it stings your eyes long before it warms your face. There's a deep, earthy smell in the air. Peat smoke, damp wool, and something vaguely cabbagey. As you step closer, you see the doors aren't tightly shut but curtained with whatever cloth or hide the family could afford. A real door would be too precious. Too heavy. And drafty anyway. That's medieval irony for you. The first house you pass is silent, save for the crackle of firewood and the muffled sound of coughing. A lot of coughing, actually. Welcome to winter respiratory season, peasant edition. You give a quiet knock, not for politeness, but because barging in might get you mistaken for a wolf. Or worse, a tax collector. Inside, it's dim and smoky. Your eyes need a moment to adjust. There's no glass on the windows, just slits with shutters, and they're closed tight against the wind. The only light comes from the hearth, a shallow pit at the center of the room with glowing embers, just enough to keep the temperature above cryogenic. There's no real floor, just hard-packed earth. You shuffle in, careful not to trip over the cat, the dog, or the occasional goose that's been invited inside for warmth and because, well, it lays eggs. You nod to the family, all lumped together on a wooden platform piled with straw and scratchy blankets. Everyone's bundled up in layers of wool and linen, patched and repatched until the original fabric might well be a myth. One kid waves. The rest just stare. You're new. Or you smell different. Possibly both. This hut, like most in the village, is made of wattle and daub, that is, woven sticks smeared with mud, manure, and straw. It holds in heat about as well as a soggy bread crust, but it's what you've got. You notice a bundle of herbs hanging by the door, not for scent, but to ward off evil. Or rats. Possibly both. The fire in the hearth is small but critical. It's not just heat, it's the stove, the light, the security system. At night, someone's always assigned to bank it. That means pushing ashes over the embers so they smolder until morning, ready to reignite with a little coaxing. Let it go out, and you're out there in the frost, praying your flint doesn't snap. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants developed these fire-tending skills from shared wisdom or sheer desperation. You sit near the fire, careful not to hog the warm spot. The youngest child, barely 5, is nudged your way. Warmth from new arrivals is always welcome, even if they're kind of damp and smell like turnips. There's no privacy here. No rooms, no doors. Just shared space, shared breath, and shared survival. Modesty is a luxury, and if someone starts snoring loud enough to rattle the beams, you deal with it. Or throw a boot. It's not quiet, either. Creaking wood, the occasional fart, someone muttering in their sleep, and always the wind, slipping through the thatch to whisper promises of frostbite. You curl into your borrowed blanket and realize, this isn't comfort. It's strategy. Everything about this setup, the crowding, the fire, the straw, even the animal guests, is designed to outlast the cold. But you've survived the arrival. Welcome to medieval winter life. One down, a few hundred more nights to go. You're barely dozing when someone jabs your ribs with an elbow. Not on purpose. Space is just tight. That's life in a one-room hut with half your village tucked in like socks in a drawer. You groan softly, adjusting your position so your hip isn't resting on a particularly sharp pebble embedded in the dirt floor. You could move. But then again, the heat pocket you've created around your body is the only thing standing between you and becoming a human popsicle. The roof creaks again. Wind slips through the thatch, finds your face, and kisses it with icy malice. Your nose protests. So do your toes. You wriggle them just to check they still work. Jury's out. Now imagine this is every night for 5 months. Welcome to winter in the age before insulation. No double glazing. No central heating. Just your wattle and daub walls, your fire pit, and whatever body heat you and your family can create. In daylight, you can see it more clearly. The walls are like a half-failed craft project, woven sticks, smeared with mud, straw, and sometimes horse dung for that extra bonding magic. It works. Mostly. But it breathes. And not in a friendly, yoga way. In a way that lets wind slither in and warmth drift out like it's trying to escape the peasant experience altogether. You stand, stretch, and immediately regret it. The warm layer of air around your body vanishes. Your joints complain. Your back feels like it was used as a plowshare in your sleep. But the sun, grey and low though it may be, is up, and that means it's time to start moving before you freeze in place. Looking around, you see the hut's layout, or rather, its utter lack of one. One space. One family. One roof. The fire pit still smoulders in the center, throwing lazy sparks and a faint glow. Above it, there's a hole in the ceiling for the smoke to escape. It's less a chimney, more an aspirational draft. The place still reeks of last night's fire, boiled onions, and everyone's collective socks. Around the edges of the room are bundles, clothes, tools, sacks of root vegetables pretending to be edible. Near the door, a cradle rocks with a slow creak. It's empty right now. The baby is wrapped and slung to the mother's back while she reheats gruel. You wish you were joking. Gruel again. It's what's for breakfast, lunch, and dinner in the dead of winter. Somewhere beneath the straw near your feet, something scuttles. Probably a rat. You both pretend not to notice each other. What really catches your eye, though, is the layering. Everyone's bundled like they're one more cloth scrap away from rolling out of the hut. Layer upon layer, linen, wool, fur, and more linen. The underlayers are scratchy. The top ones are stiff. No one moves gracefully, but that's the price of not freezing. These aren't clothes for fashion. These are clothes as survival kits. The poorest peasants wore whatever they could get, hand-me-downs, patched garments, odd bits of cloth sewn into something vaguely tunic-shaped. Bright colors. Only if you had saffron money, which you absolutely don't. You get undyed wool or muddy browns if you're lucky. And every item smells faintly of smoke, sweat, and stewed leek. There's one old man near the fire with so many layers, he looks like a walking hay bale. He's wearing 2 hoods, 3 tunics, and possibly an entire blanket. Historians still argue whether peasants layered this much out of tradition or desperation, or both. And footwear? Let's talk about that glorious disaster. Shoes, if you have them, are little more than leather sacks tied around your ankles. No rubber soles. No waterproofing. Some folks just stuff straw into them for padding. Others wrap their feet in rags, pray they don't get trench foot, and call it a day. But here's the kicker, everyone survives. Somehow. These people have adapted to their drafty huts and their damp floors. They sleep close. They dress in bulk. They move constantly. And they've learned the golden rule of medieval winter, you never waste body heat. You grab an extra tunic and toss it over your shoulders. It's coarse, smells like goat, and may have been last used as a horse blanket. But it's warm. And that's the point. Nobody cares how you look in February. They just care whether you'll make it to April. And as you open the door, really more of a wood plank draped in cloth, you're hit with that first morning blast of outside air. It punches you right in the lungs. You gasp, blink, and remind yourself that yes, this is how it always starts. Cold, cruel, and completely unbothered by your existence. But hey, you're dressed for it. Mostly. Now let's see if you can make it to midday without losing a toe. The moment you step outside, your breath fogs so thick it could qualify as weather. You blink against the wind, already gnawing through the seams of your tunic like an opportunistic moth. The cold isn't just air. It's a presence. A creature with claws, slipping under your collar and down your spine, whispering, "You should have stayed in bed." But that's not how winter works when you're a medieval peasant. The day doesn't care how much you froze last night. You've got work to do, or more accurately, you've got survival to maintain, and standing still is a good way to turn into a wool-wrapped statue. You pull your hood tighter and begin the slow shuffle toward the livestock shed. It's not far, maybe a dozen paces from the hut, but every step squeaks in frozen mud and slips over patches of ice disguised as innocent snow. You reach the rickety door, lift the latch, and are hit with a wave of scent that could reanimate a corpse, warm manure, hay, and the unmistakable musk of animals who've been locked inside for far too long. Inside, it's warmer. Not cozy. Just less murderously cold. That's thanks to the breathing, snorting, snuffling residents, a pair of cows, some grumpy sheep, and a goat with an attitude problem. The animals are not just here to be useful, they're part of the central heating plan. In fact, in many homes, the smaller livestock, especially chickens and pigs, lived inside the family hut. Not for fun, not because they were emotionally attached, but because they radiated precious, irreplaceable warmth. Historically speaking, scholars still debate how common it was for every household to bunk with their animals, but plenty of records suggest that sharing your bed with a pig wasn't just acceptable, it was smart. If it snorted and sweated, it belonged under the same roof. Back outside, a neighbor trudges past, so bundled in cloaks and hoods that gender, age, and identity have been reduced to shivering humanoid. You nod in mutual suffering. No one speaks much in the cold. Words freeze before they hit the ground. As you walk back toward your own hut, you spot a young boy layering on a tunic that looks 2 sizes too big. That's intentional. Kids wore their clothes oversized, so they'd grow into them eventually. Until then, they waddled like heavily bundled ducklings, arms barely visible beneath wool that smelled like grandma's attic. If the sleeves dragged in the mud, so be it. Mud was inevitable. What mattered was staying warm enough not to lose fingers. Speaking of staying warm, let's talk layers. Medieval peasants weren't just layering for fashion, obviously. They were constructing personal insulation systems. Closest to the skin, a linen shift. Scratchy, but breathable. Over that, a tunic or kirtle. Add a second one if you're feeling posh. Then a surcoat or overgown. Add a belt. Then maybe a cloak. A hood. Mittens if you've got hem, though a spare sock on your hand works too. Undergarments. The concept exists, but not always in the way you'd hope. Some wore linen brays, baggy underpants tied with a drawstring. Others skipped them altogether. In this weather, modesty loses every time to warmth. Still, even with all that, heat escapes. So you stuff extra bits, rags, straw, whatever you've got, into sleeves, boots, hoods. Some even line their tunics with moss. Yes, moss. It's surprisingly effective, if you don't mind feeling like you've dressed in forest carpet. And then there are shoes. If your feet aren't numb yet, give it time. Medieval shoes are basically leather socks, thin, flat, no tread, no insulation. You wrap your feet in cloth or straw for warmth, but the result is more soggy burrito than snow boot. Some folks didn't even bother and just went barefoot in the hut, waiting until they had to face the outside to strap on anything resembling footwear. But here's the strange thing, this patchwork layering worked. Not always well. Not always comfortably. But it kept people alive through winters that would send modern thermostats into therapy. Peasants adapted. Innovated. Wrapped themselves in whatever scraps, hides, or blessedly dry wool they could find. And when clothes weren't enough, movement. You chopped wood. You hauled water. You chased the goat that kept trying to break into the food stores. Anything to keep your blood moving and your toes unfrozen. Back inside the hut now, you shake off the snow and stamp your feet. The warmth, what little there is, greets you like an old, wheezy friend. Someone hands you a clay mug of something hot. You sip. It's gruel. Still. But warm is warm. You sit by the hearth again, steam rising from your shoulders. Around you, others peel back their outer layers, revealing damp linen beneath. Someone sneezes. Someone else mutters about a hole in the roof. Life goes on. You look down at your bundled self, hood, tunics, leggings, moss-stuffed shoes, and grin. You look like a walking laundry line. But you're not shivering anymore. You're layered. You're alive. You're a medieval peasant in January. And against the odds, you're winning. The fire crackles lazily, throwing shadows against the wattle walls like some kind of medieval puppet show, featuring smoke, ash, and that one ceiling spider who's clearly been lifting weights. You nudge the embers with a charred stick, careful not to let the flame die. Letting the fire go out in the middle of a January night isn't just annoying. It's criminal negligence against your own toes. In fact, managing the hearth is an entire strategy, equal parts art, science, and desperate luck. This isn't some cheery stone fireplace with a mantle and a festive garland. It's a sunken pit, blackened with soot, flanked by greasy pots, and surrounded by everyone's hopes of not becoming icicles by morning. You toss another log on, which sounds simpler than it is. First off, logs don't just grow themselves split and stacked. Someone chopped that wood. Probably you. Possibly yesterday. Definitely while shivering. Wood had to be gathered, dried, and stored in a way that kept it from turning into a soggy disappointment. You can't just drag a branch off a tree and expect it to burst into flames. That's Hollywood, not history. Good dry firewood is currency. And not just for heat. It cooks your food, boils your water, and makes light after the sun gives up at 4 p.m. That's why it's protected like treasure. Kids aren't allowed to play with it. Strangers don't touch it. And if someone wastes a log, well, they'd better sleep close to the door, where the draft can express everyone's feelings. The fire must be banked each night. That means gently covering the glowing coals with ash, forming a sort of thermal blanket that smothers flames but lets heat simmer. In the morning, you uncover the coals and, if the fire spirits smile, you'll get a small flame going again. If they don't, it's back to flint and steel. Ah yes, flint and steel. Technically a fire starter, practically a slow descent into madness. You strike metal against flint, praying for a spark. Then you coax it onto dry tinder, shavings, straw, or your last nerve, and blow gently like you're trying to flirt with it. If it catches, you're a hero. If not, you swear, stomp your foot, and consider moving south forever. Historically, this firekeeping wasn't just practical, it was sacred. Fire was life, protection, and power. In many villages, communal fires were kept going day and night, and one household might guard the flame for the whole community. And yes, historians still argue whether this tradition was more about logistics or superstition. You glance up at the soot-coated ceiling. There's no chimney, just a smoke hole. The smoke curls lazily before heading upward, making its leisurely escape through the thatch. That is, if it doesn't get bored and hang around your lungs first. Medieval homes were smoky. So smoky, in fact, that they probably caused more lung damage than dragon fire. People just accepted it. If your hut didn't smell like a campfire inside a wall closet, were you even living? Still, the hearth was the heart of the house. It wasn't just for cooking or warming your behind. It was where you ate, talked, mended things, told stories, and sometimes just sat silently staring into the coals, because what else are you going to do when it's dark, freezing, and the only entertainment is your uncle's snoring? And let's not forget, the hearth doubled as your oven. A metal pot hung above the fire or sat nestled in the embers. Bread could be baked in a Dutch oven if you were lucky. Otherwise, it was flatbreads or porridge, stirred with a stick that had seen things no spoon should. But the fire isn't perfect. You still have to deal with sparks jumping at you like aggressive fleas. And then there's the ever-present threat of burning down your entire house. Because that thatch roof above you? Highly flammable. The walls? Dry sticks and poo. You knock over one flaming log and suddenly your cozy winter hut is the world's saddest bonfire. So precautions are taken. A fire rake sits nearby. Water's kept in pots, though often frozen in the morning. And nobody swings a cloak too close to the flame. That lesson's been learned. Usually the hard way. You shift closer to the fire again, letting it kiss your shins with its heat. Your tunic steams a little where snow had melted. Around you, others stir. A woman adds dried dung to the flames. Not a joke. Dried cow dung burns hot and long, and when wood's scarce, it's the next best thing. Smells like exactly what it is. But it keeps the frost from conquering your bones. The warmth seeps into your fingers. You flex them. They're pink again. That's a win. Outside, the wind howls against the walls. But here, by the fire, you feel almost human again. The flames dance. The wood hisses. And despite the smoke, the cracks in the walls, and the fact that you're sitting 2 feet from a goat, you realize something. This fire isn't just heat. It's hope. You sit cross-legged by the hearth, lulled by the hypnotic glow of embers. It's dark outside, darker than your thoughts after eating spoiled turnip stew. The kind of darkness that feels thick, like if you stepped out, you'd be swallowed whole and politely digested by the void. Candles? Don't even think about them. Those are for churches, monasteries, and people with last names. You, however, are peasant class. You light your night with rushlights, and if that sounds romantic, let me fix that for you. Rushlights are exactly what they sound like, dried rushes, the tall grass-like plants you'd find near marshes, stripped of their green husk until just the pith remains. Then they're soaked in animal fat, usually mutton tallow, which smells faintly like regret, and left to harden into makeshift torches. You reach for one now, fingers brushing against the cool, waxy surface. It's slightly bent. They always are. Once you light it, it burns with a modest, flickering flame, like a candle that's been emotionally damaged. The light it casts isn't golden or cozy. It's pale and jittery, throwing shadows that twitch like they've had too much mead. The smell? Oh, that's the best part. Imagine a sheep on a summer day. Now set it on fire. There you go. That's the scent of warmth and visibility in your world. But still, it works. Sort of. You can see where your feet are. You can tell whose face you're talking to. And if you squint really hard, you can tell whether that rat by the hearth is chewing on a carrot or your only shoe. Rushlights are stuck in iron holders jammed into the wall or weighted with stones. Some folks use little clay saucers. The truly fancy might have a rushlight clamp, a kind of medieval clip-on lamp that says, "I'm rustic, but I care about aesthetics." And this sad little flame, is all the light you get. No switches, no backups. When it burns out, that's it. Time to sleep, or hope the fire hasn't faded to ash. So why not use a real candle? Because beeswax is expensive. Really expensive. The good stuff is made by actual bees, those snooty little alchemists, and you need pounds of it to make a single decent candle. Which means a good candle costs more than you make in a week. More than your shoes. Possibly more than your cow. Tallow candles, made from rendered animal fat, are cheaper, but they drip, they stink, and they smoke like they're trying to make a point. You might have one tucked away for emergencies or church festivals, but rushlights are your daily driver. Interestingly, some historians argue that rushlights weren't as common everywhere as we think. Some regions preferred oil lamps. Others made do with the open hearth as their only light source. But most agree, after sunset, peasants lived in a world that got very, very dim, very, very fast. You adjust the rushlight a little, keeping it upright so the flame doesn't sputter out. It hisses in reply. You're not entirely sure why, but it does. And now you're back in your seat, watching it flicker, the room painted in swaying gold and ash-grey shadows. Around you, others are settling in for the night. A mother braids her daughter's hair by firelight. A father sharpens a blade, more for farming than defense. A boy rolls up wool to use as a pillow. All bathed in that same trembling light, like a painting where the artist ran out of paint halfway through. You notice something curious now. Without bright lights, your ears start picking up everything. The scrape of wood. The shift of bodies on straw. The low, sleepy mumble of someone whispering a prayer. The pop of sap in firewood, like tiny bursts of punctuation in an otherwise breathless story. And stories, well, that's the real magic of rushlights. This is when they begin. The tall tales. The family legends. The ones that start with, back when the frost giants walked the hills, and end with, and that's why we never plant turnips under a full moon. You listen, head heavy with fatigue, as a voice begins spinning one now. You can't quite tell if it's myth or memory. Probably both. They usually are. Someone claims to have seen will-o'-the-wisps last week, dancing near the edge of the woods. Another swears a neighbor's cow gave birth to a calf with a star-shaped mark. And somewhere in the corner, an old woman mutters about Saint Bridget keeping her hands warm by praying on coals. You don't need TV. You have rumors, saints, and sleep-deprived hallucinations. But eventually, even the best rushlight stutters. The fat runs out. The flame shrinks to a gasp. And just like that, it's gone. The darkness returns like a blanket, heavy and absolute. You lie back onto your straw bed, your body wrapped in wool and hope. The fire's still glowing faintly. Just enough to keep the room from surrendering to the freeze entirely. And you close your eyes, grateful for that little rushlight, stinky, flickery, moody thing that it was. Because out here, on the longest cold nights, even the smallest flame can feel like a miracle.